Well, happy after Thursday afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back on the Conservation Conversation. Today, we have an amazing guest, Caleb Quaid, somebody that I got to spend some time talking to at a festival I was recently at in Florida. And it was called the Water is Life Festival. It was an incredible experience. Got to see people from all different facets. And what's incredible about today's guest is that we are going to talk about solutions, positivity, and solutions. So, one second here. Let me just give everybody a second to log in with us. And let's see who's here today with us. All right. So, well, I guess you know what? It's going to be an exciting day, and we're going to have an amazing opportunity to ask questions and learn about positive solutions for sustainability. So, we may as well go ahead and start off right away. Okay, well, here we go. I'm very excited for today. Like I said, today is an amazing day because, we always talk about solutions and try to talk about solutions on the private, personal solutions people can take. But there are bigger issues that we have to think about, and that includes ways that corporations and communities can take charge. One thing really comes to mind. In California, we had this incredible drought, and they were telling everybody you're not allowed to water your lawns. You get really, cautious how much you wash. Now, all these are important things, but at the same time, Disney was having the Festival of Lights. So while we were having rolling brownouts throughout Los Angeles and drought warnings, and we had all these restrictions on us, meanwhile, Disney was doing the Festival of Lights and it was being promoted. And to me, it really struck me as an absurdity because the solution needs to be multifaceted for it to work. We can do all that we can do, but we need to convince companies and communities to start thinking in a sustainable fashion, which is very difficult because they're companies and they're, at the heart of it, they're trying to bring in the best amount of revenue they can for their shareholders, and that's their job. And we can't fault them for that. So we can't be upset with them if they don't think about the way we think about things. They don't think about sustainability. They don't think about that. But what they can find is that us as consumers still have the power, and we can tell them what we want and what we don't want, what we like and what we don't like, people that we support that are sustainable, and they'll start to change their business models over time. And that's what's very exciting about today's guest, because he has found a way to bring this multifaceted approach through a lot of ancient wisdom, knowledge, but also modern understanding of how things work. So it's an incredible mix, and it's the kind of mix we need in order to find important solutions that can be done across the base. So let's see here. And everybody, I completely recommend, please ask questions while we have Caleb here with us, because it's very exciting to have somebody like this that we can tap into their brain and their knowledge and learn how we can affect things in our communities as well. So I'd like to start off, as we always enjoy, by doing the quote of the day. So today's quote is, "The greatest threat to our planet is the belief that somebody else will save it." And if you're not familiar with Robert Swan, he's the first person in history to walk the North and the South Poles. He's an author and one of my inspirations. So if you're not familiar with Robert Swan, I completely recommend to go check him out. Just Google them. There's TED Talks, all kinds of things. And it's all about taking action, holding responsibility, and becoming good stewards of our earth together. So without much longer, I'd love to introduce everybody to my good friend and sustainability guru, Caleb Quaid. Hey, Caleb.
Hey, Eric. How are you?
Good, good. Thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Right. Well, I think we've been talking about regenerative shift, and for the audience members that don't know, that is the name of your company and also the name of your concept. Can you go ahead and explain to us what that means?
Sure. Well, thank you. I think kind of as a starting point, there's this idea of regeneration, which I find more, it's growing and becoming more popular, but it's kind of still out of the mainstream. And I don't know how well your audience is familiar with it, but at a really quick high level, it has to do with kind of going beyond sustainability and working with nature in ways that follow patterns of nature to create life and heal systems and work within those systems holistically. And where this is most well known is in agriculture. There's a whole regenerative agriculture movement that is pretty well established, needs to get scaled up, a thousandfold to what it is right now, but it's pretty well established. And what I started to look at is, starting on the corporate side and the citywide side and some of these larger organizations, it's not part of the sustainability discussion yet. And one of the key elements of that is around soil health and how soil health kind of does a lot of beautiful things to the earth, as we can get into. But anyway, as a general concept for a regenerative shift, it was like taking this idea of putting life at the center of decision making at a business level, at an individual level, beyond just agriculture, although agriculture is important as well, and how we can put a little bit of life into every decision that we're making and build that into our sustainability programs, whether that be personal or for larger organizations and ultimately globally.
Now, how have you found the reception from these different corporations? What kind of companies have you been able to help?
Yeah, so what I find is, so sustainability as a buzzword has gotten pretty stale. And typically, a lot of large corporations or medium-sized corporations either are burying their head in the sand on sustainability, or they have a specific budget for it and a specific person that's in charge of that, and it sort of runs contra to business. It's maybe it has to be done from either sometimes for good reasons, altruistic reasons, people care, or at least PR reasons and stuff. But it tends to be a discussion that's in contrast to the main operations of a business. And a light bulb that went off in my head, working, my background, we may get into it. My background is in football and with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I worked there for 10 years. But I was looking at the sustainability program that the stadium has, and it is operational, and it can be done in a way that there's operational ways to do it. And so my message has really been looking at the holistic business background and how sustainability and regeneration can play into that in a way that, as a starting point, it's a business, needs to be operationally sound, needs to either save money or be involved or help meet business goals, is maybe a better way of saying it, because sometimes business goals cost money, but how do you meet holistic business goals, and realizing that sustainability and the environmental movement as a whole is good business. And so to answer your question on how that's being received, that's a conversation that not too many people I'm talking to have had sustainability framed as before, and it's been received very well. I'm almost every conversation I'm getting into is something that somebody is looking at and saying, well, yes, there's a business case to be made for this. And then once you can make a business case for whatever the environmental initiative is, and it checks a box of not costing a boatload of money or not being in contrast to, the shareholders' goals or whatever that may be, you can then connect really emotionally with the people that are involved as well. Because I find that once you peel back that layer of, you have to meet certain business goals, you take that business hat and you check that box, then you can really connect emotionally with what maybe not all, but certainly most people have a desire to do good for the planet and do good and feel like they're part of a solution. And it just hasn't been presented to them all that effectively yet by this broader sustainability movement.
I think what you bring up is a great point too, because it's always framed as the corporations are the bad guys and the environmentalists are the good guys, and the footprint of these companies, and these companies aren't going to go anywhere. So, I feel like a really important step forward is having them in alignment with the way that we see the world as well, or at least having them try to think about the future for us. So I think, what's great about this is that you're taking these two sides and you're creating a common platform and a conversation between those two, because a lot of times corporations are sort of demonized, I think, by the environmental movement, and they're not they are part of the problem right now, but it's
Mhm.
just because of their size. I don't think that they're malicious, but I think the best thing that we can do is to try to turn them into a force that can help us for our end goal. So I think that's really an amazing, way to approach it. And it's been a big issue where we're trying to get people to find ways to talk to these bigger corporations and make changes. I've worked in big offices where everyone has a K cup, and suddenly you've got 8,000 pieces of plastic by the end of the day. And if they just put a filter in there, a paper filter, it could really change things. So there are just little tweaks that can be done. Um, but I know that what you're talking about is a little bit more complex. So I wanted to get into that. First, I just want to say hi to Jessica. Thank you for joining us today. And Sierra says, "Hey, Caleb." You might remember Sierra. She did all the social media
Sure.
for Water is Life. Anne Marie, hi Anne Marie. Thank you for being with us today. It's nice to see you here. And hey, Sherry, I'm glad you joined us as well. Sherry does a lot of clean water activism down in Florida as well. So you guys should, I think, connect. Um, so now, I was just talking about very simplified version of going from a K cup to a paper filter. But can you explain to us a little bit more about how you integrate sort of holistic or more ancient ways of thinking into the newer systems that these companies are trying to use or to try to adapt to?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one thing is, as a starting point, and I mentioned I start with business as a kind of the lesson there as the initial conversation. There is a lot of low hanging fruit sustainability stuff that just hasn't taken place. I was meeting with a large public higher institute of higher learning in Florida, and was having this beautiful conversation with one of their natural sciences professors who leads their permaculture club and has all these different beautiful ideas on what she wants to do on campus, and hopefully we'll get there. But I was sitting in her office and I looked up and there are T12 fluorescent lights in her office in this, 400 office, 400 room building, 20,000 square foot building or whatever. And so what I was saying is, yes, I mean, absolutely. I'd love to get, and hopefully in this conversation, I'm sure we'll get into some of the more beautiful things and ways to connect with nature. But as a starting point, I look at, the stadium I came from was spending 7 figures a year in electricity to operate that stadium. A university system that has multiple campuses is spending 8-10 million bucks a year on electricity, some large number. And I can tell you, if you have fluorescent light bulbs, that you haven't done an energy audit, you haven't done any retro commissioning projects, you haven't looked at just the business case to be made from energy efficiency before you hug a tree from it. And so, that's often, unfortunately, that's often where we can start. But that's a really easy conversation because that's a straight business case, and I can work at, I have engineers that I can work with, and we can do that stuff, and we can set up models that, hey, I'll just take a percentage of the savings of your electricity bill to pay for our project here, and it's an easy thing to set up for people. And so that type of thing is an easy business conversation that I'm finding is effective. And then, so once you look at that, and it's energy efficiency, it's water efficiency, it's using some things there. And then you can kind of have some more conversations. And one of the big things that I'm passionate about, and probably where the regenerative side of my business comes into play, as opposed to, energy efficiency, many sustainability consultants would offer energy audits. Every company should be doing it. Every building over 10,000 square feet should be doing it. But I'm not alone in kind of doing that, or alone in regenerative things either, but there's certainly less of it. But what I've been looking at is primarily land and soil, and ways to incorporate those into the sustainability plans. And so soil is absolutely amazing, and so is water. And we were at the Water is Life event, and really it's not an overstatement that if you have healthy soil and healthy water worldwide, you don't really have environmental problems. That's we just have to get out of the way a little bit. But if we could just do the steps that would lead to healthy water and healthy soil, we don't have carbon, we don't have any problems. We really hardly do. But so soil as one to talk about, healthy soil, is first of all, we're running, monoculture crops and spraying glyphosate and Roundup and all these chemicals all over them. You might literally have no life in a handful of soil, and the food is entirely grown by chemical fertilizers and things that are put in there, which has all kinds of environmental and health consequences that come with it. But comparatively, healthy soil will have more life in a handful than there are people on Earth, and that's that does a lot of really good things. But it's the building block for certainly healthy food. Absolutely nutrient profile. You could show that if you're growing in healthy soil and it's got better microbiomes, it's going to be healthier production of food, and that's going to serve you better as a food product. But it also is the basis of biodiversity. These are the microorganisms that get eaten by bigger organisms all the way up to all the way up the food chain to the top is the foundation of that is healthy biodiversity in the soil. Turns out it's wonderful at filtering and retaining and cleaning and properly functioning for water systems. And so has the added benefit of being the absolute opposite of when we're spraying all these fertilizers and all these things that, you did a wonderful documentary that tracks a lot of that stuff. It is terrible for our waters to have all these fertilizer runoffs. Well, healthy soil both doesn't require all those fertilizers and in itself will clean the water and will do a lot of good things that will help with that. And then the one that from the business light bulb that came on for me is healthy soil literally sequesters tons of carbon per acre. And so, and to put it in perspective kind of globally, the soil of the earth, the top 18 inches of soil holds 3 times the amount of carbon that's in the atmosphere currently. And that if we increase the amount of soil in the carbon by 6% globally, it offsets our global carbon emissions since the Industrial Revolution in 1800.
Wow, that's amazing. I did not know that at all, and it seems like it's such it would be somewhat of a simple concept, but a very difficult execution to pull off.
That's for sure. It is quite difficult to put, to do that on a global scale. Like there's a lot of work that needs to take place, including all the lands between Moscow and Kiev would need to get, there's a lot of factors in the world that make it kind of challenging to do these soil restoration projects. But we have, Eric, in thousands of farms and site examples around the world, we have raised the soil content by 6% or more. And we've done it at really large scale. There's a project that some of you guys may be familiar with in China at the Loess Plateau, Loess. And that between 1995 and 2007, over a 12-year period, the Chinese government and the World Bank actually came together and funded this project, and they restored an area that's the size of Belgium that had been basically barren soil that couldn't produce for 8 or 10,000 years. That had so much runoff and erosion coming from it that it created what's called the Yellow River. And they took this area the size 35,000 square kilometers, the size of Belgium, and did this land restoration regenerative project on it that has created fertility in this area, raised 2.5 million people out of poverty because they used the people that were in the area to do this project and then gave them land rights to grow food on this now fertile land. In one generation, they were going from illiterate subsistence farmers to students attending the highest universities in China. It's a really amazing case study that we've done, over at the scale, the size of a country, size of Belgium. And so, and it's been done. There's an incredible documentary, if you haven't seen it, called Regreening the Desert that follows regenerative projects in Ethiopia and in Rwanda, where they literally in the desert have done these projects, and with without added rainfall, you just change the way the water flows and goes into the ground and change some of the things that you're doing there. Like they turn deserts into fertile land. And so we know that this works at a large scale. We've seen it done. We also know that this works at, intuitively, I think we mostly know that if you take, one lawn that's, St. Augustine grass and irrigated and all the chemicals and all this stuff, and you put one in my area, Florida firebush, right in the middle of that thing, and let that thing alone for 6 months. In 6 months, that firebush will have, bees and butterflies humming around it, and so you can do, you can do it from one bush to country size projects, and we know we can do it, and it's documented. And so what I'm looking at with my company is just getting the word out. And at every step of the, I'm working with large corporations and city governments, and at that level of discussion is where I'm trying to have those discussions. But, somebody needs to be having those discussions at the individual lawn level. Somebody needs to be having these discussions at a global level, and looking at what we can do, because this is, maybe raising all the soil by 6% is not feasible to do in every location, but it's quite feasible for the stadiums to do, different land management practices with that, and for airports to do it, and for universities to do it, and for the city of Tampa's putting together their climate action plan for a city. Well, it needs to involve what you're doing with your land. And that is just a discussion that, for whatever reason, isn't being talked about enough yet. And so that's where, I'm on your show today to tell people about it. That's what gets me fired up.
Well, I was going to say, it's like when I think about Mosaic and the documentary that I made, Phosphate.
Yep.
You see them pouring all these toxins into the water, and it's getting into the soil. And not only that, but they're selling it as fertilizer. So this very toxic elements are being sent out into the agricultural communities. And, I know everybody watching is aware between the Lake O issues, the Mosaic issues, and then on the East Coast, you have the SpaceX and the NASA, release issues. So we have sort of this multiple attack happening on the water and the soil there. And, I hear a lot of people in Florida say, stop watering your lawns, stop fertilizing your lawns. People are very conscious that there is a connection between the chemicals to the usage that seeps into the soil and also into the water. But at the same time, there seems to be a disconnect in the sense that, orange growers use the same aquifer that this toxic water is going into, and they're growing it from the same soil where this toxicity is coming from. So what I've seen, there's a very unhealthy sort of combination of things there, and the soil itself has been really destroyed throughout the area. So I think what you're doing with this approach is so important. I would love to be able to have you talk to some of these towns or counties where Mosaic operates, because they're just completely destroying everything around them with their toxicity, and there must be a more beneficial way, especially if you could get agriculture to turn from this poisonous fertilizer, and we could get residents to turn away from this poisonous fertilizer. I think that would make a huge difference in how things are running down there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple things for at a large scale with agriculture. There's an organization called Kiss the Ground. They did a documentary that I think it's on Netflix, and a lot of people have seen that. They are now doing this Regenerate America initiative that is focused on soil health and regenerative agriculture, particularly around the 2023 Farm Bill, which is it controls like the way that subsidies and regulations for the U.S. farming system is handled. So it ends up covering, like, I think half the land in the United States. And so it's a really major opportunity if we could get some different things written into that Farm Bill and shift some of these subsidies that are going to support industrial agriculture, to support the transition to regenerative agriculture, and providing some incentives for our farmers to move that direction could make a major impact. And that would be, huge for agriculture as a whole. And so that's something that you can look into. But yes, as a general answer, agriculture is huge and is an opportunity to make an enormous difference. There's the Rodale Institute is a big proponent. They, I think, are behind some regenerative organic certifications, but they have a white paper that was done in 2014 that was redone with more research in 2020 that looked at if nothing other than if we switched globally from industrial agriculture to regenerative agriculture as the only change we made on our planet, which is admittedly a big change, if that was the only change we met, that would offset our global annual emissions just from that transition. So we have, all these, this climate talk, it's, carbon is a big issue in that. I'm more, carbon, I think, is a symptom of, a disconnection from nature and some of the things that we're doing as opposed to necessarily being the problem. But anyway, so we can, yes, that's we want to not have global warming. Regenerative agriculture is a major piece of that puzzle. And then the other thing you touched on is kind of how we're managing our lawns and some of the fertilizers we're using to maintain our lawns. Lawn grass is the most irrigated crop in the United States and most fertilized crop in the United States. And there's a long history to it of how monoculture lawn crops came to be, but it really is kind of a little bit of a sinister history that there is to how that came to be our social standard. I think that there's a big opportunity for the people that are listening to this and for those that are waking up and learning more about this to redefine what a beautiful lawn and a beautiful yard looks like. Because yes, beautiful St. Augustine lawn, that you can walk on, feels nice under your feet, and it can be very nice. And there's some applications where maybe that makes sense. But my yard, which I won't tout as the most beautiful out there from an aesthetic standpoint, has butterflies and bees and birds and animals running around it all the time. And I have fruit trees growing, and I have a community garden in my front yard. And I'm planting native plants that don't need to be watered. I never fertilize or irrigate and hardly mow. That selfishly, I'd like to see that be considered a little more beautiful. So my neighbors, I don't have to have a sign in the front that says, "This is why my yard looks like this." I think that, as we realize, how important nature is and what nature is supposed to look like, there's an opportunity to redefine that aesthetics of what is beautiful, and a yard that is creating life, I believe, is objectively more beautiful than one than is taking life. And if you could, I don't want to overstate simplified solutions, but if you go to regenerative agriculture and you stop irrigating and pouring fertilizers on lawns, you don't have red tides. You don't have these problems environmentally that we're dealing with. Our water gets cleaner and our land is healthier. We don't have excess of carbon in the atmosphere, and we have healthier food to eat, and more biodiversity where we exit the sixth mass extinction that we're in. So it can be maybe almost that simple, as complicated as it might be to actually execute something that's that simple.
Well, I like that because maybe I'm oversimplifying as well what you're saying, but we have this system where people are continuously trying to find chemical solutions to better living, as as we see in the certain commercials and things. Mosaic touts himself as one of those types of companies, but over and over and over, and even like the idea of what you have in your yard, like in California, a lot of people are into native plants in the yard. Like Chelsea was just saying, nice plants already naturally grow. Your yard grows life, whereas you get the grass, and then you get the fertilizer, and you get the pesticides, so nobody's eating the grass, and the next thing you know, you're killing so many different things, as opposed to a natural landscape, which will allow it to thrive. So while we continue this incorrect forward path of thinking we can control nature, I like that your approach is that holistically, if we let certain aspects of nature thrive, nature can heal itself. Mm-hmm. And I think that's definitely a message that has been lost in a lot of ways. And it's important that we keep bringing that back, because we see it over and over and over, that if we just let nature be, and it tends to be very resilient, as long as we don't keep continuing trying to add a chemical and then add a chemical to combat that chemical, and then you get another chemical that's going to combat those two chemicals. And eventually we're going to end up with just this chemical nation that we're sort of in right now. So I think it's really great that instead of you saying let's control this, instead you're saying let's find a holistic way to let it heal itself. And I think that's really an important thing. I want to say hi to Chelsea for joining us. Real quick, Thulani's with us as well. He says, "Hey, Caleb," and Chelsea is in Florida as well. And yes, there we go. And yeah, Sherry says it's not nice to fool Mother Nature, as we know. Now, the other aspect to what we're talking about today. I was just reading a report today where recently I was in Mexico and we were investigating these corals that had this new problem nobody has seen before. It's like a virus on the actual coral itself. And most of the world, we're running into issues where climate change is changing the temperature of the ocean, acidifying these corals, which, for people that aren't aware, are living organisms. They're not rocks. They're living organisms. If you go to a healthy coral and you're down there, you can hear it clicking. There's a lot of noise and popping and cracking on a real live one. And unfortunately, some of the ones I went to in Florida, even recently, were just bone white and dead. And so we're finding that the biodiversity, that a lot of the coral experts are calling that it's going to collapse by 2030. And we've heard about the sixth extinction on its way, as well as the loss of biodiversity. So, a lot of times people are very overwhelmed by these facts. But to me, I think what the beautiful part is that we live in the time where our actions can make a difference. Maybe 100 years ago, these motions, nobody could see that we needed to take them, so they weren't taking them. But we live in this beautiful time where we can change the path of this forward future, to change how we're relating to the world. And we live in the only time where these next 8 years are going to determine perhaps the next several hundred. So I think it's very important as well that we're finding this sort of foundational shift. And I like that, it's not only a foundational shift in thinking, but that naturally brings us to this regenerative concept and this regenerative shift. Do you find that, it might be, there might be a way to get more and more companies to not only contribute to internal factors that keep them, I know you have to keep them interested. So you have to show how they can lower their costs, and you have to show how it's beneficial to them, like architecture, which way the windows are facing and things can affect the heating bills. Do you think that these companies can become leaders for the future and examples for the communities, and sort of keep promoting this on a bigger scale?
Yeah, and that's so, yes. And I mean, kind of at a macro level, we are at a period of time where, more and more people realize. I mean, you can look at like just the global narrative on climate and where we're going. There's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that keeps issuing these reports, and had a series of reports that came out in the last year that basically say it's now or never. And based on our global actions, it's looking like we're choosing never on this. But like more and more, we're seeing it all the time. When the west coast of the country is in a 27-year drought at this point, and is becoming increasingly more obvious some of the symptoms that we're dealing with that weren't obvious when I was a child. It was talked about, oh, this is coming, but now it's really coming, and it's here. And there's this report. A lot of the climate discussion has to do with degrees of total warming. And there's a report that came out a couple of weeks ago that said 50-50 chance that we cross one of these major thresholds by 2026 in the next 4 years. And so, it's 50-50. And so, at some point here, we're going to, as a society, wake up, and we're going to realize, whether that's in Florida, a Category 6 hurricane rolls through here, and people say, okay, something needs to give. We have had this disaster, or whatever the circumstance may be. And I believe, we've seen it with COVID, we've seen it with other times in history. Humanity can act quickly, and we can make changes, and we can do stuff. And what makes me optimistic is there are these solutions that are out here. So when we make our decision that it's time to wake up on this, there's at least an opportunity that we do so in a really beautiful way, because there are some solutions that are really beautiful and life affirming that can be also solutions to what are becoming imminent problems. And so I look at it, at that level, we don't have, if you're talking an 8-year horizon and we're reaching these global thresholds, at some point this is going to be a top story on the news as we start to experience these things. We don't have too much longer that people are going to be able to say, well, this is a problem for tomorrow. And so what I'm looking at and talking with businesses, and City of Tampa is putting together a climate action plan that's supposed to halve the carbon footprint by 2030. Okay, you're putting together a plan now that says what you're doing in the next 8 years here. Well, what is that going to be, right? And so, and how do you do that without land? But when I'm looking at, I have a client of mine that is a large construction company based out of Tampa, and they, they've always had some, their owners have always been environmentally focused, but their business really wasn't operated particularly that way. Construction is a tough business to really have too much of an environmental focus in. But, we're working together on this holistic plan to change the way that they do business, not just from a business standpoint, and there's going to be some really beautiful things, pollinator gardens and vegetable gardens on construction sites, and different materials that we're using, and composting, and getting rid of single-use plastics. There's a lot of really cool things that we're doing that are, operationally going to be helpful. But it's also a rebranding of how they're doing business, and a holistic marketing approach that will be authentic, that will be able for them to say, we do business differently. We do construction differently than other companies in this market. And so, as right now already through Biden's infrastructure bill and a lot of the public stuff, there are requirements to meet certain environmental standards that are already in public buildings and different projects. That's only going to increase. That fervor is not going to get smaller. We're not going to, we have to do better as we build things more. And so what this company is looking to do is, over the next couple of years, really authentically change their operations to be prepared to be the leader in this region for, and authentically be able to go in and say, hey, we've been doing this for a couple of years, and we're ready to lead on these types of projects moving forward as a medium-term business marketing plan. Because it's, this is coming. This is where the business is going to be, and let's be prepared for that and be a leader in that. So to answer your question on, is there an opportunity to be a leader? There's, at some point here, we're going to be looking at it, and there's going to be protests about carbon, and there's going to be, there have already been them in a lot of different places of the world, but, might as well, if you're, I was having some conversations a while back with Tampa Airport. Might as well, start to do some of these things. Yeah, you might not be able to solve your whole carbon footprint of an airport, but let's start to make some strides here before somebody's picking outside your airport in a couple of years, so that if and when that comes up, you're able to point to things that you're authentically doing that is making a difference, and maybe they're picketing the airport down the street instead of yours, right? And it is business at this point. Like, there is a business case to be made in the short term, in the medium term, and certainly in the long term for changing the way that we're operating. And I'm finding that that's a conversation that people are ready to have.
That's great, because we need unity. And, there's already enough division in so many of these different sort of water activists and approaches. And, we've always needed to reach out. And I believe that the more we unify is the only way we're going to find solutions. So I love that you're bringing normally groups that wouldn't be included in the way that we think into our fold, which I really, applaud you for that, because I can't even imagine how difficult it's been to get the inroads to say to them, I just want you to consider something slightly different. Now, Sherry has a question. Oh, no, wait, that was the wrong one. Sherry says, Caleb, what are your solutions? What are the solutions you would suggest now for farmers to take action?
Well, I mean, if farmers have the opportunity to start to look at their inputs and look at their operations, there are, it's a transition period, and agriculture is, it's not. I just read an article a couple days ago that was talking about, like, it's a real look at what it takes to transition from industrial to regenerative agriculture, and it is a process, and there's a lot of questions and a lot of learning that's there. But a farmer right now should absolutely start to research that. And there are things such as cover crops that you can put that will really help your soil, and will actually, just for those that may not be aware, most of our, well, I don't want to say all, but almost all of our food that we eat at a minimum that's grown in the ground is very high in nitrogen. Nitrogen comes out of the soil into the plants, grows into a tomato somehow through something that I would still pretty much consider a miracle. But you end up with this very nitrogen-rich tomato that you end up eating. But a tomato plant can only pull nitrogen out of the soil. Our atmosphere it's predominantly nitrogen. It's the most dominant element in our atmosphere. And there are some plants that are able to actually take nitrogen out of the atmosphere and put that into their rootstock and put that into the soil, and can replenish that, and actually can be a fertilizer within the soil. So in the permaculture world in Florida, pigeon pea is a very famous one, and Mexican sunflower is another. And there's a bunch of these plants that are able to do that. They're called nitrogen fixing. But from a ground, I'm in Florida, so most of my experience is here. In Florida, you can plant sun hemp as a cover crop, and that crop there is nitrogen fixing, and will keep the soil cooler, so stop some of the evaporation of the water that comes out of the soil. It will actually add nitrogen into your soil during the summer, during periods where you're not growing things. Otherwise, it might stay fallow. That now could be something that is adding nitrogen to your soil during that time period. So you need to use less nitrogen, even if you're still doing somewhat traditional industrial agriculture. Now you have an opportunity that your soil already has more nitrogen in it, and you need to do less of that. So there are steps that you can take in the transition. There are really good resources. If you're a farmer, I would direct you to regenerationinternational.org is a really good website that has enormous amounts of information. If you want to reach out to me, I recently got connected with a woman who is actually doing a lot of funding of transitioning farms to regenerative, and helping with a lot of that paperwork that needs to take place to get those grants and to do that type of stuff. And that's her business. She's out of California, but certainly can be a resource to connect some farmers with that type of stuff. But it's, being part of that transition and being a leader in it. Like right now, it can be challenging, because they're, typically, to make a transition has some trade-offs, like a lot of things do. And so where we need help from, funders and things, is to help to, manage that transition, so that, they're able to do that in a way that is, doesn't put them out of business. Something we can do locally is start to look for farmers and ranchers that are using these types of practices already, and support them. Same website, Regeneration International, has a farm map where you can go in and you can put in your zip code, the products you're looking for, certain practices that you're looking for, and the way that they manage it. And it will pull up a map that will tell you the nearest farmer that has the chickens that are raised a certain way that you're looking for in that area. And you can support those farmers that are already doing that. That's something locally could be really beneficial to them. Starting to change our demand habits will go a long way into changing the supply habits as well.
It's very true. A lot of times people forget that we have that power. We can vote with our dollar. We think with our hearts very often, but we can only really vote with these companies. They only understand the language of money. So the best thing is to do is speak to them on their language and show them, if you do these regenerative things, if you do these sustainable things, we love you. We're going to give you all the money. And, we do not like these other companies that are continuing these practices. And we're seeing a shift. It's really an amazing thing these last maybe 5-10 years, we've really seen a lot of changes in the way people are thinking. And I think Chelsea has a great point. The kids are coming, the millennials, and they care.
Mm-hmm.
And it's true. A lot of these kids have grown up in a different world than I did. I'm 49. I grew up in the concept of everything was bountiful and plentiful and everything was fine and chemical stuff was okay. It was just the knowledge of the time that was being sold to everybody. So we didn't know any better at that point, although a lot of people did, but the general public wasn't really aware. So, we're getting into this point now where kids are growing up more aware of the new world they live in, whether it's buying houses or living sustainably, using less plastic, which is so important, especially when it comes to water and soil. Recently, there's been an issue where people have been buying and throwing in all these plastic reefs into the water around Florida, and it's creating all kinds of issues with microplastics, which is a whole other issue, that affects the water and the soil. Um, let's see, and I think Chelsea also had a great point that she said, when the water is toxic, like Southwest Florida, it hits them in the pocket, and it's true. Between tourism, which is one of the most important industries that I know keeps Florida running, between agriculture, tourism, and a lot of that is being destroyed right now. And I think people also are looking for holistic solutions due to the manatee issue that they're seeing. They're thinking something so deadly with our water, and nobody's telling us what it is, but we know it's just the water. What is happening? And people want answers. And a lot of these companies are contributors to what's happening because they've been allowed to continue the way that they have for 50, 60 years. So I just want to reiterate, I really love that you're going in there and trying to change that, because you make just one company changeover, and that's like changing 1,000 people's habits, a couple thousand people's habits, and that impact, it grows and grows. So I think it's really important. Let's see. Sierra says, inspiring to hear how a notoriously resource-dependent industry such as construction can make changes. That's exciting because that does show us that any industry can do it. I challenge you, phosphate industry. I would love to see that. Chelsea says, I'm learning that unifying and breaking the boundaries is coming soon. Republicans do care too, and new Republicans. We have to stop doing politics with our environment. And, Chelsea, I would like to reiterate, I totally agree with you. The problem we have right now, I believe, is that we have people looking at the environment through their political talking points. And what we need to do is actually judge every single politician through the lens of the environment. And that's that. And I always encourage everybody to check out opensecrets.org. You can see who is donating to your candidate, and that's going to help you understand how they may vote in a critical situation or if a bill comes up. So, I don't believe an answer lies in either. I don't think politics is something that maybe will help or solve the problem. I really think it comes down to these businesses, and they're autonomous of these politicians. So, the more that Caleb can get in there and continue to change the minds of these companies, even and even if you're just saying to them, I can save you money, and by doing that, they're saving the world, helping save the world, and it's win-win. Jessica Quaid says, for someone like me who hates bugs, I understand their purpose, but don't want them around me. I think we're talking about pesticides. On an individual level, as you mentioned, lawn care, what would you recommend for a sustainable, regenerative landscape that I don't have to worry about getting attacked by wasps, bees, and or snakes when I'm in my yard or when my kids are playing? Interesting.
Yeah, so inevitably, if you're creating more life in your yard, there's going to be more life in your yard, right? So what I enjoy doing with my kids is moving slowly through the yard and looking at the life that is there, and kind of working with that. But yeah, you will have, if you're planting pollinator gardens, you will have pollinators in your yard, and that there. What I find that there's a balance there. Almost, it's a little metaphysical, but that nature kind of understands when you're there in a way that's in cooperation with them, and there's less concern with it. But to be able to tell you, I mean, there's not a lot of ways to bring more pollinators to your yard without bringing bees to your yard and stuff. That's sort of how that's the gig.
And that, that's great, because that's about slowing down and appreciating nature around us, which is really important part of being able to understand a holistic approach to change, and the good and the more challenges that we might face as people. So I like that. It sounds like the kids are having
I've also
a wonderful
had,
upbringing.
and there are, so you can find things that will give all kinds of different, mostly around like growing your own crops and stuff, because there are many pesticides that typically people are using to keep the caterpillars or whatever that eats your that eats your tomatoes off the plants. And there are all kinds of different things that you can use and stuff. And I found with many good permaculturalists that are holistic, they can do really good at finding ways to keep their plants from getting eaten by too many bugs, right? Like if you have ducks in your yard, they'll eat the slugs, and so you don't have too many slugs eating these things. But I will say openly, I have not found a solution for mosquitoes, and so like if you go to a permaculturalist farm, there's mosquitoes there, right? And there are lots of different things out there that say, oh, we're supposed to get rid of mosquitoes. I don't know that the DDT or whatever we're spraying on the mosquitoes really gets rid of them either, because you go anywhere and they're hitting you pretty hard anyway. But I think some of it looks at how, what you're going to look at, and yes, you will have some mosquitoes in your yard, and that may be something that you have to deal with and put individual bug spray on, or choose the time that you're going to be outside or something like that. But when you look at holistically and how that is working with nature, and what the mosquitoes are providing, and what your yard as a whole is providing to the ecosystem and to the environment as a whole, and you compare that to what maybe a mosquito-free world looks like on the grander scale, where it's just concrete and maybe ultimately no life at all on it, there's going to maybe be some trade-offs that you have to learn to love a bug bite or two.
But as I say, Jessica had a great comment here. I think I will plant them far away from the entryways and social areas so they can have their own space, which is, something that's not usually thought about. People put flowers right at the pathway, and they don't think about them aside from an ornamental value that they provide to the eye for a moment. And, it's so more important to think of it as a part of the entire ecosystem. And so, it is important to be considerate of these animals and of these pollinators, especially as we're losing them at a rapid rate. And I think Jessica's solution is also fantastic. Just make sure that when you're going to have something, if you're worried about it, give them space, and it'll give you space. Of course, like some of us may, still interact now and then, but yeah.
Hey, Eric,
Chelsea says more bets.
You'd made a, kind of an earlier comment. I think Chelsea had made it on seeing the effects of what's happening in Southwest Florida with the red tide and how that's last year was a really big opportunity. I mean, it happened to be, we saw in the Tampa Bay region, the Piney Point situation where 22 million gallons of radioactive phosphate was dumped into the bay. And, we had a fish kill that was at least very closely related to that, to kind of look at, how that can go beyond politics stuff. I think something like that, when we see something that is so blatant and so obvious, which unfortunately we're seeing more and more frequently these days, that gives people the opportunity to, for that alarm bell or that sniff test to say, this doesn't smell right anymore. We have to do something different here. The death of the, life in our waters is vital to our economy. It's vital to this region. I mean, I don't think anybody in Tampa Bay would argue that the health of Tampa Bay and the Gulf isn't vital to every aspect of life and our economy in the space. And so when we have these types of events, it does provide opportunities to have conversations with people that might not be able to have those conversations previously. The construction company that I'm working with, their owner has been a friend of mine for a while, but he called me last July, right after, the fish kill started happening in Tampa Bay, and said, I see what you're saying, and we need to do something different. He is, to tie to the political side of things, he is a Republican. He's a Ron DeSantis supporter that actively went to Ron DeSantis and said, I don't support the decision that you made at Piney Point here. That killed fish. He has a tarpon boat. He likes to fish for tarpon, and you can't do that during that time. So all of this, now he's a client of mine that's looking to change the way his whole company is doing business in the construction industry. So there are opportunities to have conversations that come out of these types of situations that are unfortunate, but are also opportunities and are chances for us to, I don't have a great water solution. I mean, there is, certainly get rid of lawn fertilizers and stop dumping chemicals in your water, and we'd have a lot better water, but that's not an easy take this pill and it's all better solution for our environmental crisis. It's a bigger conversation. But we're going to see these fish kills. We're going to see these red tides every year from now on. Like, this isn't going away. And so there are opportunities with these different disasters that come through to have conversations and for more and more people to wake up. And we've seen it throughout history that change happens very gradually, and then rapidly. And I think we're right at that point. I mean, we haven't talked about it yet on here, but one of the project that I'm probably most well known for took place at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, where an NFL stadium planted a living fence of bamboo and native plants. And, we just had a couple weeks ago, Fox 13 News Tampa Bay just came out and did 10 minutes of coverage of that fence that we planted at the stadium. So we have an NFL stadium doing a regenerative planting project, and Fox News coming out to cover it and report on it. We are at that point where it is starting to be practical and starting to be good news and starting to be something that the mainstream is ready to accept. And so there's opportunities for us in the roles that we have to be part of that conversation and to further it.
Wow. Well, thank you for your work out there, Caleb. I really like what you just said also, that even in conflict or, in a moment where there seems to be conflict, it's a great opportunity to open a conversation, to start to speak to the other side. We've had a very polarized sort of world the last 5-6 years. We need to reunify, because it is the only way forward. And even if you don't agree with somebody, it's fantastic, because you have two different points of view that can create a third potential solution. And that is, I think, our path forward. So, it's really important that we continue to move forward with conversations, with reaching out to the other side. And I love that you're doing that, because, I think it's amazing how you sort of have one leg in each world, and you're able to combine those two worlds. And, both of the worlds need that help. So, the corporate and us over in the regular world. It's like Cecil Ortega says, America needs love. It's true. We need to recombine ourselves, and we need to be holistic, and we need to think about positive solutions, not just the negative. So many people focus on negatives, and I really enjoy that you are focused on the solutions to those, because they're within our reach. We don't have to accept what we have already. We can require and demand better. And if these people want to continue running businesses, then hopefully they will meet that demand for us. And if not, the natural market will weed them out over time, as long as we continue to put pressure and say, we really want to see this. And, what's incredible about that stadium is everybody that goes to that stadium now has a new thought. Whoa, regenerative fence, sustainable fence. Like, what's this? And that's going to lead people to go home and put the seed in their mind that maybe there's a different way. Not everything that's a fence is just that chain link, kind of thing. So
I've had two different bamboo nurseries have told me that the type of bamboo that we planted at the stadium is selling out. They can't keep it in stock anymore, just from a little bit of coverage of it. So there's
beautiful.
There's some of the things that I get really excited about is the opportunity to work with, an NFL stadium is a chance to, they can be thought leaders, they can be innovators. And when they make a shift, it makes it easier for a construction company to make a shift, or, dare we say, a phosphate company to make a shift, because they, can see the tide that's coming with, with these changes once some of these market leaders make some moves. And so I think the time is now.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Caleb, for joining us today. It's been an incredible learning opportunity to get to talk to you today. I really appreciate being here with everybody. Sierra had a question. Would you have any suggestions for small businesses if they're new to sustainability but don't know where to start? Part of that I would like to use as our ending question, but also I would like to remind everybody, reach out to Caleb, go to Regenerative Shift, go contact him, let him know what the problem is in your neighborhood, whether it's a big company or it's your company or it's a friend's smaller company. Caleb can find solutions that'll match every level of company, even if it's a community homeowner association. So in every single level, there's a way that we can bring this regenerative shift concept in. So I just wanted to sort of say that as we ask you with the very last question. We have been talking about the bigger corporations so far, but what about the people that are between us individuals and the bigger businesses, the personal owned small businesses?
I love it, and thank you for the question, and thank you for having me on, Eric. I really appreciate it. So what I borrowed this from Paul Hawken, who is he literally wrote a book on regeneration that came out last September. But regeneration is putting life at the center of decision making. So what I would say for a small business, an individual, for anybody is, we are dealing with, you're making a decision today, you're making a decision medium term, you're making long term decisions at different scales of things. How can you layer life into that decision? Some practical things that a small business can do if they have a building and it doesn't have solar and they're paying, more than a couple $100 in electricity, you can put solar on your building and save money right away. Would highly recommend doing stuff like that. You can do some energy audits, some of the things that I was talking about there. If you have an entryway where people are walking through, maybe to Jessica's point, a little bit away from that, plant a little pollinator garden so that you can have a little pollinator habitat on your site. Use some native landscape. There's a lot of things that you can do in landscaping that save you money, because you don't need to water things, you don't need to fertilize things, and also create life. Anyway, there's a lot of things that small businesses can do. Certainly you could have conversations on, what are you doing and how are you doing that? But at the core is, what decision are you making, and how can you look at life in a way that's layering in, look at the decision in a way that's layering in life. So the stadium had a business decision that they needed to have some way of stopping curb jumping at this one parking lot. That could be an aluminum fence, or it could be, in this case, a living fence that solves the same problem in a way that layers in life and costs less money.
I love that. Layers in life, keeping life at the center of decisions for the future. Thanks again, Caleb. It really has been an amazing conversation today. I hope you come back and keep talking to us more on another show. I know there's a lot of questions people have here, and we'd love to hear more solutions, ideas, and innovations. So
awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you everybody for tuning in. Really, this is it's inspiring to talk and listen.
All right, thank you, and really appreciate your time today, and we look forward to catching up with you again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everybody. Well, that was Caleb Quaid. Again, regenerativeshift.com. Sierra put that up for us so we can see that link. I highly encourage everybody to contact Caleb. Like I said, he works with all size businesses. And the beauty of it is, not only can you become a green business and can you become a sustainable business with this regenerative thinking and this regenerative shift in your thinking, but it can also save your company money. So it's a win-win. So everybody really comes out on top with this. And I love what Caleb said, keep life at the center of these decisions. We need more thinking like that, and we need more approaches like that, and we need more uh, ways to do that. And so Caleb is quite an innovator, I think, leading us to solutions, practical solutions to worldwide problems that affect all of our futures. And unfortunately, they're going to affect us even quicker than we imagine. It's not going to be in 100 years. We're not talking about 100 years from now. We're talking about 4 to 15 years from now, the destruction of the reefs, destruction of the biodiversity, destruction of soil, destruction of water, potentially the sixth extinction. We can all change that. Scientists have agreed it can be changed if we just make these efforts to change, especially with climate change. What Caleb was talking about today was incredible about soil and carbon sequestration. And, I think there are these amazing natural, holistic approaches. And he's trying to use what we know about nature to help nature heal nature by nature through nature. We don't really need to be part of that. Nature does not need us, but they do need us to step up, speak up, and change the way we're doing things. And so, again, I just wanted to thank Caleb for being here today, because it's a lot to think about, and it's a lot of shifting in the way we think, and it will change our future path. So great. I appreciate everybody for being here today. Sierra, Paula, Chelsea, Sherry, everybody that was able to come in and make these great ideas, comments, Jessica especially. I love the idea of let life exist, coexist. This is the way things should be, and we should be thinking about the entire world anyway. Amy and everybody else that could join us today, Thulani, thank you, everybody. It's important that we have these conversations. Don't let the conversation slow down. Keep the conversation alive. If you bump into somebody that thinks differently than you, it's a wonderful opportunity to open a conversation. So everybody take care, and I can't wait to see you next week.